My name is Catherine Ellery. I am 61 years old. And when I drove away from the Hargrove Country Club last Saturday evening, my hands were so steady on the wheel that I frightened myself. There was a paper napkin on the passenger seat, white, monogrammed with a gold H, folded into a triangle the way they fold them at formal dinners. I had taken it without thinking. It had a smudge of béarnaise sauce near one corner and a thumbprint of red wine near the other. I held the wheel at 10 and 2 and drove 9 miles under the speed limit the entire way home. And when I pulled into my apartment and turned off the engine, I sat in the dark for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 because the dashboard clock read 9:47 when I parked and 9:58 when I finally opened the door. Let me tell you how we got there before I take you back to where this started. Tell me, what time is it where you are right now? Because I remember exactly what time it was the night everything changed. Some moments burn the clock into your memory. 7 months earlier, I was standing in my daughter-in-law Vivian's kitchen, arranging a fruit platter for my grandson's 4th birthday party, when Vivian walked past me carrying a stack of custom invitations and said, without breaking stride, "Catherine, the family photos are at 3. You're welcome to stay for cake after, but the photographer knows it's immediate family only." She said it the way someone reminds a caterer about the timeline. Efficient, already moving to the next task. I held a strawberry over the platter, my thumb pressed into its flesh until juice ran down my wrist. I didn't put it down. I didn't respond. Something behind my sternum went very quiet, the way a machine goes quiet when you switch it from active mode to recording. I should tell you what I do for a living, because it matters. For 34 years, I have worked as a compliance auditor for municipal bond issuances. What that means in plain language is that I read documents other people consider finished and find the places where the numbers do not match the story. I examine disclosure statements, cash flow projections, debt service schedules, and offering circulars. I look for the line item that was rounded when it should have been exact. The date that shifted by 1 business day, the signature that appeared on a version of a document that didn't exist when the signature was supposedly given. Most people in finance think compliance is where ambition goes to die. They're wrong. Compliance is where the truth lives after everyone else has finished decorating it. That skill had protected municipal investors from fraudulent representations for over 3 decades. It was about to audit my own family. I need to go back further than the birthday party. I need to go back to the beginning of Vivian. My son, Marcus, met Vivian Hargrove when he was 26 and she was 24. The Hargroves owned a regional chain of luxury event venues. 5 locations across the state, the crown jewel being the Hargrove Country Club, which Vivian's father, Gerald, had built in 1991. Vivian was beautiful and organized, and had a way of making every room feel like it had been waiting for her to walk into it. Marcus was in love within a month, married within a year. I paid for the wedding, $41,000. Gerald Hargrove shook my hand at the reception and said, "Welcome to the family, Catherine," with the warmth of a man signing a receipt. Over the next 5 years, I contributed to their down payment, $28,000, wired directly to the title company. I furnished the nursery when Vivian was pregnant. I covered 3 months of their mortgage when Marcus switched jobs and the gap between paychecks stretched longer than expected. I babysat my grandson, Oliver, 3 days a week so they could avoid daycare costs. I drove 40 minutes each way. I reorganized my entire work schedule around their needs, shifting to a 4-day compressed week that my supervisor approved only reluctantly. Each time I gave something, Vivian received it the way you receive oxygen, without comment, because of course it was there, snorts. The irony is that I spent my entire career identifying when someone's stated obligations didn't match their actual disbursements. Turns out, my own household was running the same discrepancy. I just never pulled my own file. The birthday party was not the first exclusion. It was the first one said out loud. Before that, there had been the venue deposit, there had been the Christmas card that listed the Hargrove family on the front and included my name only on the interior as a separate acknowledgement, like a donor page. There had been the vacation to Hilton Head, where Gerald and his wife were invited. But I was told the rental house only had 4 bedrooms. There had been Oliver's baptism, where Vivian's mother was named godmother, and I was seated in the 4th row. Each incident was small enough to explain. Together, they formed a geometry I recognized from my work, a pattern of systematic exclusion disguised as logistical necessity. But the birthday party broke something, because it was the first time a door was closed in front of witnesses. And when I looked at Marcus across that kitchen, holding a strawberry so hard it bled in my hand, I saw what I had seen in his father's face 30 years earlier. The expression of a person who knows what's happening and has decided the cost of objecting is too high. Marcus's father, my ex-husband, left when Marcus was 9. He didn't fight for custody. He didn't fight for weekends. He just recalculated his life, and I wasn't in the new spreadsheet. I had sworn my son would never inherit that arithmetic, but, standing in Vivian's kitchen, I understood that the arithmetic had found him anyway. He had simply learned to do it to someone else. Here is where I tell you what I found. After the birthday party, I did something I had never done before in a personal context. I opened a case file. Not a literal one. I didn't have a case number or a docket. But I opened a folder on my personal laptop, labeled it with a date, and began entering data the way I would for any engagement where the initial disclosures didn't reconcile with observed behavior. The first thing I examined was money. Not because money is the most important thing, but because money is the thing that doesn't lie when you pull it out of context and lay it flat. I printed every bank statement from the last 6 years, every wire confirmation, every canceled check. The total I had transferred, paid, or absorbed on behalf of Marcus and Vivian's household came to $114,200. I wrote that number on a yellow legal pad and circled it. Then I set the pad on my kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. Something in my chest recalibrated. Not anger, something colder, something that had edges. I could feel my breathing slow the way it slows when I'm 3 hours into a document review and I've just found the first discrepancy. The numbers were running in my head without my permission, cross-referencing dates and amounts with what I'd been told at the time each payment was made, and that was layer 1, the obvious insult. $114, $200 in direct financial support to a household that considered me not family. Late Cert 2 arrived 11 days later. I had requested copies of the deed and mortgage documents for Marcus and Vivian's house. Not from Marcus, but directly from the county recorder's office, the way I would verify any property encumbrance in a bond transaction. What came back made me set the papers down and leave the room for 20 minutes. The deed listed 3 names: Marcus Ellery, Vivian Hargrove Ellery, and Gerald Hargrove. Gerald was on the deed. My $28,000 had gone toward a down payment on a house that Gerald had quietly added his name to. Marcus had never mentioned this. When I called the title company and asked about the original closing documents, a clerk confirmed that Gerald's name had been added during a deed modification recorded 14 months after closing. Well after my funds had been applied. The modification was signed by Marcus and Vivian. No one had informed me. No one had asked. My money bought a door. Gerald's name was added to the frame afterward, and that's what I was carrying when I walked into that room 7 months later. Layer 3 required patience. I began reviewing emails, not Marcus's, but my own archive. Every message I had sent or received related to family finances over 6 years. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was looking for the pattern beneath the pattern. What I found was that every major financial request had arrived within 10 days of a Hargrove family event. Vivian's father's birthday, the anniversary gala for the country club, Christmas at the Hargrove estate. The requests weren't random. They were timed. The pattern suggested that each contribution I made was discussed before it was requested, that Vivian and likely Gerald had identified a schedule for extraction that coincided with moments when Marcus would feel maximum family pressure to comply. I mapped it on a timeline. 9 out of 11 major requests fell within the window. That is not coincidence. That is a disbursement calendar. Letwit 4 was the document that made everything else irrelevant. Not because it was worse. Because it was first. I had been reviewing Gerald's business filings. Publicly available, as part of a municipal licensing record, I pulled through my professional database access. The Hargrove Country Club had applied for a property tax abatement 4 years ago. In the supporting financial documentation submitted to the county, Gerald had listed household contributions from Catherine Ellery as recurring gift income to the Hargrove Ellery household, effectively characterizing my financial support as a gift flowing through his family's financial ecosystem. My money was cited in a tax document I had never seen, never signed, and never authorized. The filing carried an attestation signature from Vivian as household representative. I compared the signature to the one on Oliver's school enrollment form. The slant was consistent, but the middle initial was missing from the tax filing. V. Hargrove Ellery on the school form, just V. Ellery on the attestation. A small error, the kind you make when you're signing something you've drafted yourself, rather than something an attorney prepared. The author metadata on the PDF showed it was created on a machine registered to Vivian Hargrove, not to any law firm or CPA office. Vivian had drafted the attestation herself and signed it with an incomplete version of her own name. I sat with that for 3 days. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't call anyone. I printed the document, placed it in the blue folder with everything else, and closed the folder. Then I went to work and audited a $40 million revenue bond issuance with the same focus I brought to everything else. My hands did not shake. My reports were flawless. But at night, alone in my apartment, I would open the folder and look at that attestation signature and feel the particular nausea of understanding that someone had not merely excluded you, they had monetized you. There is a person I need to tell you about. Her name is Diane. She is Marcus's aunt, my ex-husband's younger sister. Diane had always been polite to me but distant. She attended Hargrove family functions because Marcus invited her, and she sat in the social geography between my world and theirs without committing fully to either. After the birthday party, Diane sent me a text that said simply, "That was wrong." I didn't reply. 2 months later, she called and said she had seen something at a Hargrove family dinner that bothered her, but she wasn't sure it was her place. I told her I understood. A month after that, she asked to meet for coffee. She brought a photograph, taken at the country club's annual charity auction. In it, Gerald stood beside a large presentation board listing the club's major donors. My name was not among them, but my contribution amounts were attributed to the Hargrove Family Foundation. Diane had been seated beside Gerald's wife when the board was unveiled and had noticed the discrepancy because she knew from conversations with Marcus years earlier approximately what I had given. She hadn't said anything at the auction. She said she'd felt sick about it since. She set the photograph on the table between us and looked at her coffee for a long time. "I should have said something sooner," she said. I picked up the photograph. You're saying it now. That was all I offered. It was real. And it wasn't enough. And we both knew it. The confrontation happened at the Hargrove Country Club. Gerald's 70th birthday celebration. 200 guests, white tablecloths, a string quartet in the garden. The dining room Gerald had designed himself, vaulted ceiling, mahogany panels, oil paintings of the Hargrove properties arranged chronologically along the east wall. Gerald stood at the head table like a man who had built the room to frame himself. Vivian had organized the evening. Marcus had been assigned toast duties. I arrived at 6:15 carrying a leather portfolio. During the cocktail hour, Vivian approached me with a glass of sparkling water. "Catherine, so glad you could make it. We put you at table 9. Table 9 was near the kitchen entrance, far from the head table. I accepted the water. "Thank you, Vivian." After the first course, Marcus stood and delivered a toast to Gerald. He praised the man's vision, his generosity, his commitment to family. I listened without expression. When the applause faded, I stood. Vivian noticed first. "Catherine, speeches are by invitation. This will only take a moment." My voice carried across the room the way a voice carries when it isn't raised but refuses to be interrupted. I opened the portfolio. I removed the first document. The deed modification showing Gerald's name added to Marcus and Vivian's house after my down payment contribution. I placed it on the table in front of Gerald. "This is the deed to my son's home. Your name was added 14 months after I provided the down payment." Gerald glanced at the paper. "This is a private family matter." I placed the second document, my bank statements showing $114,200 in transfers. "These are records of my financial contributions to your son's household over 6 years. Vivian stepped forward. "Catherine, this isn't the time or the place." I placed the third document, the property tax abatement filing with Vivian's attestation. "This is a county filing listing my contributions as gift income to the Hargrove family ecosystem. It carries your signature, Vivian, though you left out your middle initial." Vivian's hand moved to the back of a chair. Gerald stood. "I think you're confused about how these things work, Catherine. Family finances are complicated. You're only doing this because you're bitter about the birthday photos," Vivian said. Marcus looked at the documents. "Mom, can we do this privately? After everything this family has done for your son," Gerald said, lowering his voice to the register messieurs, "when they want the room, to hear them being reasonable. I would think gratitude would come before accusations." "This isn't an accusation. This is an audit." Gerald laughed. It was the wrong move, because at that moment a voice spoke from table 4. "I can confirm the figures." The room turned. A woman I had never met stood holding a small notebook. She introduced herself as Patricia Simmons, the former bookkeeper for the Hargrove Country Club, employed there for 11 years, before being let go the previous spring. She had kept her own copies of the financial records she'd processed. She had seen my contributions reclassified in the club's internal donor management system. She had flagged the discrepancy to Gerald 2 years ago. He had told her it was a family matter and suggested she focus on her own responsibilities. 3 months later, she was terminated. Gerald's face went very still. I looked at him. I did not raise my voice. Gerald decides that generosity is ownership. He accepts what is given, removes the giver's name, and calls it his. I said nothing else. The napkin in front of Gerald, white, monogrammed with a gold H, sat untouched beside his plate. Marcus stared at the documents, then at Gerald, then at Vivian. His mouth opened. Nothing useful came out. The string quartet had stopped playing. Vivian tried once more. "Patricia was fired for incompetence. This is slander." Patricia held up her notebook. "I have 11 years of records, Mrs. Ellery, dated and witnessed." That was the end of it. Not with a dramatic collapse. Gerald sat down slowly, adjusted his napkin and said nothing else for the rest of the evening. Vivian left the room. Marcus remained at the table, reading every document I had placed in front of his father-in-law. He read them the way I read bond disclosures. Slowly, checking each number against the one before it. Within 2 weeks, I retained an attorney. A formal demand letter was sent to Gerald Hargrove, requesting removal of his name from the deed and restitution of funds misrepresented in the tax filing. Gerald's attorney responded with a counter-offer. My attorney declined it. Within 6 weeks, Gerald's name was removed from the deed. The county assessor's office opened a review of the property tax abatement application based on the fraudulent attestation. Vivian received a formal notice of investigation regarding the filing she had signed. The Hargrove Country Club's nonprofit arm, which had listed my contributions under the Family Foundation, was flagged for an independent audit. Gerald's 70th birthday became the last event the club hosted before the audit froze its charitable accounts. Marcus called me 9 days after the confrontation. He didn't ask me to apologize. He asked if we could meet. We sat in a diner on Route 12. He ordered coffee and didn't drink it. I didn't know about the deed, he said. I signed what Vivian put in front of me. I believed him. That was part of the problem. You signed what was put in front of you because looking closely would have cost you something. He didn't argue. 3 months later, Marcus and Vivian separated. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment 12 minutes from Oliver's school. Vivian moved back to her parents' house, which was the subject of its own complications, because Gerald's financial position was deteriorating under audit scrutiny. 2 of the 5 Hargrove venue locations lost their event liquor licenses during the review period. Client bookings dropped by 40%. The family that had built rooms to frame themselves was running out of rooms. Deanne came to my apartment one evening in October. She brought a bottle of wine and an apology that took her 20 minutes to finish. She said she had watched the pattern for years and named it privately as concern while doing nothing publicly that cost her anything. I was comfortable being worried, she said. Worry without action is just spectatorship. I poured her a glass of wine. I didn't tell her she was forgiven. I told her I was glad she came. We sat with that, and it was enough for the evening, though not yet enough for everything. I took Oliver every Wednesday and alternating weekends under the new custody arrangement. The first Wednesday, I picked him up from preschool. He climbed into the back seat holding a drawing, a house with 4 stick figures. He pointed to each one. That's Daddy, that's Mommy, that's Grandpa Gerald, that's me. I looked at the drawing. You can add anyone you want, I said. He thought about it. Can I add you? You never need permission to add me. He drew a 5th figure with a red crayon. It was taller than the others, which made me smile for reasons he wouldn't understand for a long time. There was something I had postponed for 6 years. When Marcus and Vivian first asked for financial help, I had been 3 months from enrolling in a waterfront landscape painting course at the Community Arts Center. $60 a session, Thursday evenings, 12 weeks. I had canceled the enrollment to redirect that money and time toward babysitting and household subsidies. A small thing. But small things, given up repeatedly, become the shape of a life you didn't choose. This past April, I enrolled. Thursday evenings, $60 a session. The instructor's name is Martin, and he has the patience of a man who has watched many people discover they are allowed to want something for themselves. My first painting was terrible. My second was worse. My third had something in it, a quality of light on water that I couldn't explain but recognized as mine. Last Saturday evening, after the painting class, I drove home along the river road. The sky was the particular shade of violet that happens in early summer when the sun has been down for 20 minutes, but hasn't fully released the horizon. I pulled into my apartment complex and turned off the engine. On the passenger seat was a paper napkin, white, from the art center reception table, folded into a triangle. It had a smudge of cadmium yellow near one corner where I'd wiped my fingers, and a ring of coffee near the other. I picked it up and looked at it for a long time. Then I carried it inside, set it on my kitchen counter beside a glass of water, and stood in my own space without explaining my presence to anyone. I have thought about this for a long time, what it means to be named in someone else's story as a resource rather than a person. Not erased violently, but recategorized, moved from the family column to the accounts payable column so gradually that you stop noticing the transfer. The silence around that recategorization is what allows it to continue, not anyone's dramatic cruelty. Just the steady, daily agreement of everyone nearby to look at the spreadsheet and not ask who prepared it. I think about Diane sitting at that auction, reading a donor board with my money and someone else's name, feeling sick, and going home. Feeling sick is not the same as speaking. Discomfort that never becomes language is just the body keeping a record the mouth refuses to file. And I think about Gerald's dining room, the vaulted ceiling, the mahogany panels, the oil paintings arranged chronologically. A room built to display the evidence of one man's vision. Every room like that requires someone whose contributions are recategorized as atmosphere. Consequences didn't come to that room because I was angry. They came because I finally treated my own life with the professional rigor I had and extended to strangers for 34 years. The audit was always available. I just hadn't opened the file.